I wrote this once before, and it was 9 pages long and ridiculously dull to listen to, although really informative. Here is the condensed version. Alright, you feckless hominid, so there's been a bit of a stirring up on the internet recently with Twitter and that, because The Witcher is a fucking colourblind game. There's this guy who wrote a thing on Polygon about colour in games, and he starts with Rust. His name is Tariq Moosa. So for those of you that haven't seen that, he wrote on Polygon about The Witcher 3 being colourblind and how Rust wasn't. So we started off with Rust by saying that it did a thing where your Steam name has a number ID, and that number determines your blackness or lack thereof, which makes you either a bold black man or a bold white man. So white gamers, who no one should really listen to anyway, said stupid shit about not buying the game because fuck being a black guy, whatever. Others said they play games for escapism and fuck that shit too. Okay, yeah, I get it. It's a forcing an issue that otherwise people who want to escape from aren't able to escape from, but if face-punched studios want to force diversity, a pretty meaningless thing anyway, that has no effect on the gameplay, and that people don't like that shit, then, you know, it doesn't really matter. Those people who aren't going to want to play it leave, because they shouldn't be listened to anyway. And, you know, face punch, they get to do a thing that they feel is important to do. So, you know, cool, whatever, yeah, fair. So we have an example of a video game that Moosa is happy to use and then juxtaposes it with The Witcher 3.
Just make it quick, Geralt. What the? Close your eyes. Hit him.
Darling of the press at the moment, and with good reason. It's super awesome. Seriously, it's really, really cool. Great game, it has monsters and sex and fabulous hair. There's probably a Tumblr dedicated to Geralt because fabulous hair equals Tumblr fanfiction. Anyway, to get back on track, Moosa plays The Witcher 3, really enjoys it, but notices that there are no coloured people or people of colour, whichever is more politically correct at the moment. So let me tell you, The Witcher 3 is pretty much set in 12th century Poland, according to the internet. And yes, it's a fantasy world, and yes, it can be changed and does not have to be historically accurate, hence there can be black people in the world of Witcher 3. That is, in the northern kingdoms, even in metropoli like Novigrad or Oxenfurt, because, you know, there's plenty of reasons for foreigners to be there. There could be trade, education, or whatever other reasons may really be rationalised into the area and can be used to explain minorities away. But I love a challenge, and frankly, I respect the right of the artist to make whatever the hell they want regardless of what other people want. So let me just say, The Witcher has always been about Geralt, and has always been made in a certain way. The fact that you, the consumer, does not appreciate a lack of diversity in a game doesn't have much of a bearing on the artist himself. You have every right to boycott this product if you feel that it is damaging for you. So let's try and defend the game because I'm a white cis dick who doesn't give no shit about nothing that includes proper grammar. So let's take a look at Poland. For those of you that don't know, Poland is a country smack dab in between the nation states of Belarus, Germany, Ukraine, Lithuania, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Russia. A tiny little sort of enclave of Russia to the north on the Baltic Sea. Yeah, I think it's near like Königsberg, I think, in Prussia. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. So in history, the traditional inhabitants of Poland, the Slavs, have had a pretty shit time. In maybe the last 100 years, they have in fact had a really shitty time. In between being invaded and sent away to concentration camps and being killed, and being invaded and either being sent away to the Gulag and being killed, or being impressed into a transnationalistic army preparing themselves for World War III, on top of having their national identity and rich culture being systematically wiped out and crushed to comply with preferred foreign culture, you could say they've had a pretty bad time. So as a result, very few people in Europe effectively have a large interest or availability to information about Polish language, Polish history even, and culture, aside from vaguely they're Soviet and they're probably going to be taking our jobs. So let me be completely honest here, in the past 25 years or so, when the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, my year of birth by the way, the Polish have been grasping with the personal freedoms that they didn't really have under the Soviet Union, and before then, while suffering oppression from Nazi Germany and Germany during the First World War. While there were some points between the First and Second World War that would have allowed proper freedom, I don't consider a gap of, say, maybe a generation to be really long enough to develop a proper artistic attitude. Most of the people who were parents would probably have either eloped if they were of the artistic type, or would have probably been more concerned with surviving and not being invaded again. So that's Poland, but of course after the Second World War, black people may have emigrated there, right? Well, actually it's unlikely, and here's an example why. So Britain, unlike Poland, had a colonial empire which stretched across the globe from America to India to Africa. As a result, when we had a void of space that resulted from losing a generation of men to war, we needed people to fill the gap. Cue immigrants arriving by boat from the colonies looking to live a better life and to find work. These migrants brought their families with them, and that is effectively why Britain has a sizable minority of black people, Arabic peoples, and Asian Oriental people in the Indian subcontinental region. So people from India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. As a result, the majority of British people are very accustomed and indifferent to Asians and black people living in and around Britain. It's a fact of life to the point where different curries and ethnic foods are enjoyed and practically considered a staple of British culture. As such, an artistic portrayal of Britain would likely include portrayals of Gaelics and Celts, through to Normans, through to the Industrial Revolution and interactions with ethnic peoples, ranging from slavery to liberation. It's indisputable that Britain has enjoyed a checkered past, but to refuse to portray that would be dishonest. The same can be said of other nations that experienced a colonial empire and otherwise multicultural society. It seems fair to suggest that France would have a high proportion of North Africans as a result of their colonisation of Algeria, and that Italy may too have a sizable proportion of Ethiopians, although may too have a large proportion of North Africans, Greeks, Balkans, and other sort of Syriac peoples as a result of Mediterranean trade. Poland, being roughly pretty much landlocked in Northern Europe, had neither a colonial empire nor a free and open society after the Second World War like the Western European nations. Likewise, it's highly likely to suggest that during the 19th century, slavery based upon skin colour would have been less common because it was a more insular society, more considered with European possessions than colonial possessions, more concerned with Austria, Austro-Hungary, Russia, obviously, and the other Balkan states, including the Ottoman Empire. So after the Second World War, Poland would have experienced more immigration and movement from inside the Soviet Union than outside of it. Therefore, the people moving into Poland would have been largely white Caucasians, leading to a more homogeneous country. Now let's leave this for a second and look at artistic expression. An artist is very much a product of his or her environment. They draw upon past experiences, collective experiences, and their environment in order to make something truly representative of art. So CD Projekt Red would most likely develop a game that is representative of their culture from their own experiences, that is, of a widely held view of mythology and folk stories from within their culture in a historical backdrop of how they feel their country and culture was, in this case during the 12th century. Let's look at Orion Legacy of the Coryardon. It's an African-made game from Cameroon, actually, and it looks really, really good. It's an RPG inspired by African mythology and stories, and as such draws heavily upon that imagined fantasy world. It is perhaps less grounded in reality than it might otherwise have been, but otherwise looks very good and displays a lot of information about culture to people who otherwise may not be compelled to seek that information. As fascinating and entertaining as that culture and mythology might be, to my mind, this is what CD Projekt Red are doing with the Witcher series. The Witcher series is bringing Polish culture and mythology as well as an overarching Slavic mythos to outsiders either in Western Europe, the Americas and other places. So let's get to the bit that we all really want to talk about. Is The Witcher 3 colourblind? Is an example of white privilege and willful ignorances to the plight of ethnic minorities by the evil straight white male? No. The thing about The Witcher is that the people that made it are mostly Polish, if not entirely Polish, and it is a portrayal of Slavic history and mythology in a fantasy world, sure, but still heavily influenced by medieval Poland. The Slavic culture is one of the most maligned and misrepresented cultures in Europe, and certainly by today's standards often feels itself become the target of intense discrimination, not just by ignorant dipshits who no one should really listen to, but even by national tabloids, such as in the UK with any particular tabloid they could probably pick up, notably The Sun, or the Daily Mail. It's easy to look at the Witcher issue and consider it from a Western point of view. It's easy to see CD Projekt Red as being willfully colourblind and making an attempt at whitewashing a game, but as a European I can tell you that it's not just because you're white that you are automatically privileged. Put a person from each European country into a room and sooner or later there'll be a fight. As nations, we've lived together, we've warred together, and we have a relationship that makes Christmas with your entire family look like a walk in the park. Trust me, being white doesn't make you immune to racism. With European racism, the matter isn't actually all that black and white. CD Projekt Red are not colourblind. They're emphasising their own culture and mythos based on previous experience they grew up with. They've gone with the artistic decision to emphasise their own culture, which has been horribly misrepresented and suppressed, and they'll be happy to, in the future, include nation-states of other racial groupings, such as far-off Zerikania. At this moment in time, you could say that they're concentrating on their own culture before they increase diversity, and I for one salute them for the work that they're doing for their culture. American games should be multicultural and multiracial, because the environment that they're created in and the world that they portray will often be created from the developer's personal collective experiences. This means that the world would include black people and Asians, which I would expect from American games, British games, and any open Western society that has existed with people of different races and in a multicultural state for maybe the last 50 to 100 years. The rule for Poland, I hold, does not apply, because Polish culture is not privileged. Black culture and Asian culture are often considered damaged by social commentators because they don't enjoy the privilege that white people enjoy, because white culture has oppressed black and Asian culture. As I said before, Europe is different. Diversity is not just based on race, but also on cultural and linguistic lines. It is undeniable that black culture, for example, has been damaged by the effect of slavery. and that black culture should be given a wider scope for representation. But the historical problems faced by Polish culture, in my opinion, make for an equally strong case for wider representation. That is why CD Projekt Red should be allowed to make a game that is perceived by Western culture as colourblind, because they deserve the chance to embrace their culture once more.